It's hit.
We're live.
That's right. Let's do it. Let's go strong. We got a lot on the menu today. We wanted to talk about Breonna Taylor, but we're still like gathering information. And a couple people said that they were going to hit us up, and they didn't hit us up in time. We want to give them a little extra time. So we're going to discuss Breonna's situation tomorrow or potentially Thursday, but hopefully tomorrow.
It just depends on when people get it.
Unfortunately, none of these issues are going away. And in some ways, like we retweeted about Bolivia and we talk about that off the air all the time. None of these issues, the media does not control what matters, man. These people's lives, the many Black lives that have been snuffed out by police brutality ain't going to be forgotten, ain't going to be going away just because like we push an episode back a day. They need to be remembered in the long run. And everybody who's familiar with our show knows we are all about doing that. So yeah, it is what it is. What's good, y'all?
Well, today we're going to be kicking it with Aqua Walters, so at least we still have some cool shit going on. Aqua, say hi.
Aqua, what's up?
Hey guys, how you doing? Making it, bro. Making it.
Yeah, we recorded a podcast episode with you discussing your plan for creating a national third party slowly but surely. And I think a lot of people are going to be really interested in that. But since nobody has heard that episode yet, because we ain't published it, can you tell people a little bit about like what your mission is and how you've been doing it?
Give us the
I mean, the project is called the movement. The National Progressive Party. The elevator pitch is quite simple. We don't care about congressional or presidential races. All we care about are local races, right? So we're talking, I like to call them dog catcher offices, from dog catcher all the way up to governor. We think those races are the most impactful, and those races make a material difference in the lives of men and women, men and women all across America every single day. We saw in the recent weeks in George Floyd's murder, for instance, the DA had refused to bring charges against us, or declined to bring charges against the officers. And there is a definite culture within law enforcement and I'd say local governments that support this culture of violence against Black people and people of color, that the NPP is definitely working towards putting progressive candidates into those offices.
Hey, that sounds extremely good.
Yeah.
And we get into it in a little more depth in the episode, which is still to come.
Next Monday.
Oh, all right, yeah. Coming real soon. Coming hard at your head. But now that people know who you are, let's talk a little bit about what the issue is. What are we talking about in Minneapolis?
So
what's happening?
The Minneapolis City Council is moving to defund the police. Now, right now, we don't know if this is really going to happen or if this is like a gesture, so to speak. But to have this on the table as a talking point is pretty significant. And we thought this week here on Not Safe for Wonks that we would make the emphasis of our live streams be on envisioning alternatives to the police and just sort of like looking at where this system has sort of like come apart and failed, and how to actually improve upon it. And let me tell you how you don't improve upon it. It's the bill that the Democrats in Congress are writing.
Bruh.
Of course.
Did you see Pelosi and Schumer in the Kente cloth? That's going into meme history. This is
Are they now on the border of blackface cinematic universe? Like, are they kind of edging their way into that?
Well, here's the deal. The blackface cinematic universe is movies. Like, it's very big budget, high production. This is a smaller scale of blackface. So this is more like the Netflix cinematic universe. Chuck Schumer is like Daredevil, and Nancy Pelosi was like Jessica Jones. And they just teamed up to just do a little small scale idiocy that's not as memorable, but it's still kind of oof.
But but let me slice to the bone here, real quick, right? Like
Yeah.
what you're discussing, bro, is a culture of performative politics
Mhm.
that we've seen the Democratic Party, like the Republican Party, like they try to do it for black people, but they're more effective when they do it for disenfranchised poor white people. We saw Muriel Bowser in DC, the mayor of Washington DC,
Yeah, Muriel
getting them
Bowser,
to paint Sixth Street, all was this Black Lives Matter visible from space. But like you have to remember, Muriel Bowser was one of those mayors just earlier this year who was supporting Michael Bloomberg. If you don't remember who Michael Bloomberg is, Michael Bloomberg is the guy that instituted stop and frisk in New York City that invaded thousands of black bodies, right? So this is all performative politics. And like I said, I have a list of people who came out in support of Bloomberg. I will never forget those faces. I will never forget those people, because every single time this thing happens, they're the same ones that come out and do some random bullshit like put on kente cloth and kneeling looking like the Avengers or some shit.
Well, let's be real. Even the Democratic Party's supposed savior of the moment, Joe Biden, has no perfect history when it comes to law enforcement and people of color. Let's just be perfectly honest about that, you know? Like, so they're all lining up behind. Oh, but never mind, actually, because if you vote for Joe Biden, you're black, so it's okay.
Yeah, yeah, but like Joe isn't the problem though. Like this is what I'm saying. Like, all right, the people who wear the Ku Klux Klan hoods and are like Joe Black, I'm not equating them, but and are like Joe Biden, like they aren't the problem, because we know these people are racist. You want to know who's the problem? The problem is exactly what I think it was a couple of weeks ago on CNN. Some guy had said that it's these Hillary Clinton voting liberals. Like they are the problem. Like they come out and say, "Oh, we're in support of X initiative for black people or people of color," and like more often than not, their votes go to the Joe Bidens and the Ku Klux, the hood wearing people from the KKK. Right, more often than not. And like we have to address the fact that the country leans more conservative than we like to think, and we have to address the root. Yeah,
I don't think that's true. Well, it is effectively true, but I think we have a right wing that is conservative, and we have a liberal party that is deferential to power. And maybe those two things are the same thing, but they have just been trained that is how to survive, that is how to win elections. So in order to like kick those people out, there needs to be a strong alternative to those policies and to those people. Maybe we're kind of agreeing in different ways, but like when I think about like what's the problem, who do we need to get rid of? I mean, I would like to get rid of, if you gave me a choice, I'd get rid of the Republicans, because they invest billions of dollars into not like, oh, the country leans conservative. I don't know whether the country leans one way or another, but I know the Republican Party, as an apparatus, invests billions of dollars into maintaining power. That's educational power, that's structural power, that's physical power, it's legal power. I might have mentioned education, I'm not sure. But all of those things that they have built an infrastructure that works to radicalize people, and they are very diligent about it because they spend in ways that Democrats obviously can't and won't match. And unfortunately, we have a Democratic Party that is very good at delivering actual things to their donors because that's their clientele. So when the bailout fund came out, you know, they were very with it to spend that money and make sure that those companies got their bailout. It's incredible. We had a world historic bailout when this COVID broke out, and there's no discussion about it. It's like down the memory hole, a staggering amount of money. Your money, gone, out the window, finished, finito, done.
And now they're saying there probably won't even be a second stimulus check.
Bro, these people gave you 1,200 G's and said you on your own. And what they give the regular people is first of all, they try to do performative stuff, and why did George Floyd's murder set off this uprising in America when black people are being slaughtered every day and there's no movement on these things? What radicalized people to go out and march and riot and damn near shut this country down and bring the police force across America to a damn standstill? What radicalized them was their material situations, because niggas is out here with no food, no gas, no water, no heat. Rent is coming up due, and all these municipalities are not canceling evictions, and definitely ain't canceling no rents. So those physical conditions are what has made people so desperate that they've got to go out and do something. Y'all know what I mean?
Indeed.
Yeah.
Indeed.
It's wild.
I mean, I think we've said it a few times now, but it's like this material condition, you cannot put people in this desperate of a situation and then send the message that the killing of George Floyd, and specifically the lack of response on top of that, you know,
People
like I've
already
said
feel
so many
like they're on
times,
the edge of death
this
right
is-
now.
we all know this in our hearts because we've all read the story now. This was over $20. This was over $20 at a time, like Brandon said, when people don't have food, when people are struggling. You know, when you are looking at the situation and you're like, damn, am I going to have rent and food money?
Hey,
And this is not hypothetical, like
No.
for me or a lot of people I know right now. Like this is the real situation that basically most of the people that I know are in. Is like, do I have money for everything, or do some things have to get cut? And we're not talking about Netflix, we're talking about important shit.
We talking about hot water. We talking about yeah.
When people are looking at that down the barrel of that gun, and then you're like, we're killing this guy for $20.
There's already an overwhelming indifference to life. Like I read somewhere that this shit went down and the Republicans said, fuck them all, let the devil take the hindmost. And the hindmost are like, hell no, you're not taking me. Not for no reason. And yeah, so it's just a real disgusting situation on all ends and from all sides and with all people responsible for it, man. It leaves me feeling dejected.
Yeah, and I mean, your analysis about the Republican Party being the institution that you'd most like to get rid of. I mean, hot damn. I can't agree. I can't agree too much with you on that, because like the right wing is going to form whatever the right wing wants to form in place of the Republican Party if you got rid of it, right? What I think, however, is because we don't leaving the Democratic Party the way it is now is probably the greater evil, because again, they will deliver to us more kente cloth politics than the Republicans, and they will deliver these surface level types of reforms, which aren't real reforms, which are things like, which we knew were coming anyway, like gay marriage, which we knew is important. But on top of gay marriage, how are these people going to pay? Like, how are you going to handle like the material, how would you say, the material well-being of these LGBT people after they're married, right? Like what about healthcare? What about a $25 minimum wage? Like, they always do this kind of performative social type of politics, and we have to look past that. We already know what the great evil of the Republican Party is, but we have to look past that with the Democrats and find a way to build new infrastructure to deliver real material change to people.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about the situation in Minneapolis then, with all that as the backdrop.
Yeah.
When they say that they want to defund their police department, have they been specific about what that would entail? Because like defunding and abolishing obviously aren't the same thing. What do we know what specifically they want to do?
I mean,
there's not been a really
I
specific
don't.
talk
Right.
of like
They've just
what
made a
is the
pledge that
next
they're going
step,
to do it. Right.
which is
I feel
again
like they
part
all
of why
got-
I
Go ahead.
wanted to like encourage this conversation here today and to like make this like a theme. Like I feel like a lot of people are like, yeah, let's get rid of the police, but because they haven't read any theory on this subject, because they haven't listened to any of the people who've been talking about this for a long time, like Angela Davis, who I'm always going to mention every time this comes up, like because they haven't been listening to people like that.
To be fair, it's hard to read books, man. It's time consuming. We all got jobs and shit. Yeah.
So
we used
So-
to have jobs, but you know, because people haven't
So-
done the research, they haven't done the homework on to like what comes next. I find a lot of people that are relatively left wing or relatively on board with the idea of changing or getting rid of the police in some fashion. They don't know what to do next, and so they kind of get cold feet. And that's one of my concerns with this Minneapolis situation, is that if there's not a cohesive, here's what we're actually doing, we're not just, you know, taking this away and then that's it, bye. Here's what we're actually doing, then, you know, I think that there's going to be issues. Because especially one of my biggest concerns is that the right wing love to make a fake example out of something. And like if Minneapolis just defunds the police with no plan of any other kind of like ways in which they're going to like address the conditions that people live in that lead to crime and things like that, then like crime will get wacky, people will be upset, and they'll go, we want the police back, and the police will come back 10 times as militaristic
Right.
as they were before, and everyone will cheer, yay.
And there will also be like some right wing psychos that go to Minneapolis in order
exactly
to start trouble for political reasons.
exactly
So they have a lot to think about and go through it. I kind of, for that reason, I kind of don't mind that they haven't laid everything out, because like all this is happening in the heat of the moment. So they've made that commitment, and sometimes you got to make a commitment, but then you do need to sit down and like figure out what is that going to look like and what are we going to do. So they might be watching this show.
Right.
Like, what do y'all got for us?
So I mean, first we have to take a broad view of why policing is the way it is in America, right? And like this goes back to the 1990s,
That's right.
when our good friend Billy Jack, you all know him as Bill Clinton, was running, and he was running to put I think it's like 150,000 more police
Mhm.
in what they like to call high crime communities. Ironically, high crime communities are usually inhabited by Black and Latino people. Well,
Weird.
immigrants, Black, Latinos,
Dang.
those types of populations. But the broken windows policy was essentially the broken windows theory of policing is what essentially informed this, right? Like
Right.
y'all might remember a guy called Bill Bratton, who was kind of seen at that time, and even up to 2016 when our good friend De Blasio had him as commissioner of New York City, that you have to police smaller types of crime in order to prevent bigger types of crime, whatever that meant. But like clearly that's been a failure. Like we saw a couple I think it was a couple months ago when a year ago or so, when the New York the NYPD went on strike essentially. Like crime legit went down, right? So there is merit to the way that Minneapolis, that the city council is approaching it. But I like to make the analogy about crime that, when you go to the hospital, you have different doctors that take care of different things. What we've done, I think, wrong is like we've ascribed too much responsibility to the police. There are things that the police respond to that when you think about it, they have no business responding to. We're talking about people who are overdosing. You don't need police for that, right? We're talking about
You need medical care.
sexual abuse and trauma. Like you don't need police for that, right? Like sure, if there's a suspect on the scene, yeah, sure, get the police. But in a case like that, chances are that person needs mental care.
Right. Yeah, and I think there's been some statistics that show that like the majority of murder victims in a lot of states are people that have been arrested multiple times. Like once you get into this system of like crime and law enforcement and punishment and things on your record and all of these things happening, you just become increasingly a sort of victim of that system. And it's like it's sort of in a way like the old myth of like, oh, we need more mental health care to prevent shootings, which is like this sort of like false truth because of course people who have mental health issues are more likely to be the victims of a violent crime than to commit one.
True
It's
that.
sort of the same thing with people who have been in and out of the prison system. Like when you worry about getting abused by someone, getting murdered by someone, getting raped by someone, the people that are experiencing this are the people being ground through this system. Those are the people getting these horrible consequences that you're so scared of, why you think you need the police.
And you know what's interesting about that? Like, I'll interject. So there's this documentary on Netflix called 13, and in it there's this lady named Baz Dressinger. She's an amazing academic out in New York who does a lot of prison to college pipeline work, and she does that work throughout the world, like in Africa and the Caribbean. But point being, like Minneapolis is looking at that kind of should be looking at that kind of a policy. Like you're using the funds from the police to figure out how can we enact laws that when these people get out of prison, the people that are actually in prison get out of prison, how can we help to expunge their records so they can actually vote, so they can actually get jobs, right? Like there, and Brandon, I'd love to hear your opinion on that.
It's a mess. It's incredibly complicated because it has a history that goes back many, many years. But I think that one of the things that makes it difficult is because we as a society depend on people not having jobs in order to depress wages. Without that whip of like poverty, starvation, you would not be at your job working and being underpaid. You would take a few months and try to find something that was better or better suited to you. But
Brandon,
yeah,
we all know that it's the immigrants. It's the immigrants coming from Mexico that are depressing wages. What do you mean? What is this?
In order to have in order for businesses to compete and continually increase their profits, the profits have to come from somewhere. And we are already like the idea of shipping shit from one point to another has already been done and mastered. You know what I'm saying? The idea of marketing is always improving, but it's damn near optimized. It gets more and more optimized all the time. The immovable thing that a business needs and must have in order to succeed is labor. And right now we're doing everything we can to, one, have mass unemployment so that you will work for as little as possible. And two, to mess with your hours so that you are, you're getting fewer hours and you're doing more work. You're doing like the jobs of two different people at your job. Like who here listening is going through that right now? Your boss, oh, well, can you do like these 3 different duties? Nah, man, I wasn't. Yeah, I'm not paid to do all that shit. But now you are paid to do all that shit because the alternative is you get cut. And there's so many people that are desperate right now that somebody will come in there and take your place no matter how bad the situation is.
I mean, how many jobs now like are, they're not even quite full time. They're like 30 hours a week, but then you have to answer emails all weekend for free just to keep that 30-hour a week job. And it's like, you get hired to some of these jobs thinking, oh, this is great. I'm getting paid sometimes like $20 an hour, whatever. But then it's like, you're only getting paid for 25 hours a week and you're working 50. And like, there's people in this situation all over the country right now who aren't being paid for travel time, who aren't being paid for emails after work, who, whatever the case may be. Like they're being forced to put in all these unpaid hours. And it's ridiculous.
Well, this is where we have to talk about unions and their roles in, or rather, their depressed role in society, but their enhanced role in law enforcement, right? Which is an interesting dichotomy because, like, we are used to unions being stripped of most of their powers, but in law enforcement, I don't know how it happened, but in law enforcement, they have a really strong union, and or rather, they tend to have really strong
They
unions.
have a strong union because they're armed, Aqua.
Also, they were. If you want my opinion, it's like they were the union busters. They literally got to go out there and say which union stayed and goed, and they said, "Yeah, we're keeping ours. We don't care." You know, like
Right.
no one's coming to bust our union because we
Right.
are the union busters.
Right. Again, which is an interesting dichotomy. Like, so now the question becomes, when we're talking about Minneapolis and other police departments around the country, how do we decrease the power of those unions? Which is an
Uh,
interesting
uh,
conversation for
what,
leftists to be
what,
considering, right?
what an interesting topic that you've raised. There's a really excellent podcast called Not Safe for Walks. They do a live stream daily at 4 Eastern. And a little while ago, they did an episode on literal things that you can advocate for to break the power of police unions. One of those things is qualified immunity, which is just cops are unable to be sued if there is, and I'm not a lawyer, so I might have gotten the phrasing wrong here, a reasonable expectation that what they did was not illegal in an unprecedented way. So there are so many situations where there's like a chase or someone gets run off the road and there's no recompense towards the person that's injured or
Right.
killed by a police officer. If that changes and cops become civilly liable, there's also stuff like insurance. If police have to have their own insurance, that means if you're involved in an incident, there's a financial penalty for any kind of misconduct. Those are there are lots of other things that we could be doing to break those unions. They unfortunately, I said this, De Blasio is like hiding in his office. He's just completely broken in half. And he can't say anything despite all the blatant abuses the NYPD are doing. They're doing a good job. Keisha Bottoms was in Atlanta talking about.
It's ridiculous. It's like every day NYPD is on Twitter like, "We'll shoot your dog, De Blasio. We'll do it."
Yeah, they literally were talking
it's
about
such
kidnapping
an
his daughter.
honor.
Yeah,
It's such an honor to be
How are these
insulted
people?
by the best police force in the world.
How are these people not considered armed insurrectionists at this point?
well, there's just something called just the power of the state. And look, the other half of this is there's the stick of that armed insurrectionist element. And in a lot of ways, the police politically are not just mere servants of capital. They're kind of their own entity in a practical way. But there's also this carrot of police endorsements, of police donations, and they are at every level of government, like doing that political work to ingratiate themselves with that ruling class. So, if you are willing to play along just to a certain degree with the cops as an organization, they help you run for election. And if they don't, then they can talk about how you're not keeping the people safe and endorse your opponent. And then what are people going to do when the cop union is like, this mayor is not keeping us safe, and we're police officers, and it's so dangerous in the city, and this new person will do a better job, and that person is like on the payroll, on the take. It's rough. It's a bad situation.
And of course,
I know you got something on the screen. I'm gonna shut up.
Well, I was going to say too, that system of nepotism going kind of feeding back and forth into itself goes all the way back to through the history of the police force as we know it in this country.
Yep.
Before the formal police force was established, it was a little different. But once the formal police force was established, using the Robert Peel fucking rules from Britain, then these people, they would literally the people who wanted to be cops would pay to get someone into office who would appoint them as cops, and then they would just jerk each other off for the entirety of that person's term as mayor or whatever.
Cool.
It's completely ridiculous. And that's the thing is like, we're still seeing that system to this day. It hasn't actually changed all that
That's right.
much.
They're all doing literal mutual masturbation. Stay hydrated, mayors. That's really all I can tell y'all.
All right, let's pull this tweet up.
Yeah, let's do it.
This
Can you zoom it in a little bit? Because some of our viewers do not like have good eyes.
Let me try to.
Yeah, I try to make it as big as a little bit
There
bigger.
we go.
Okay.
All right, so what would be a better slogan than defund the police? This tweet reads,
Okay.
reallocate public funds, reinvest from the police, reimagine the police, demilitarize the police.
Well, first of all, at least 3 of those literally sound like a fucking Pete Buttigieg debate answer. Like if someone were like I'm not looking at it right now. Pete, what's your stance on defunding police departments? And Pete would go, well, I support reimagining the police in order to reallocate public funds, something like a reinvestment from these departments. It's like, buddy, what are you talking about? Defund is not too strong. Like, first of all, the word defund is not even it's not even strong enough. We should not be talking about defunding the police. Like, if our goal is to stir the public, we should be talking about abolishing these departments. We talk about abolishing ICE, and we can say that with our chest. So what's the deal? What's the difference?
It's so funny because defund the police is already this step down from abolish the police. Abolish the police has been the slogan for decades. And just in the last few weeks, these like neolibs made up defund the police. They just like pulled that one out of their hat of, of gentler slogans. And they're like, okay, we're gonna defund. We don't want to say abolish because that implies something bad might happen to these cops. And we're just defund it. Nothing bad's gonna happen. We're just gonna remove the. And now it's like we're 2 weeks into this, and already these neolibs are like, are you sure we should say something like defund the police? We had someone commenting on our own Twitter page today saying it's bad branding. It's too strong of language. Like,
listen,
this shit is everywhere now.
These are the same people who were like, Black Lives Matter, kind of strong. Like, what happens all the time is the left comes up with an actual policy proposal. It gets fucking watered down a little bit. Then it becomes like mainstream language. And from there, it gets so ruthlessly co-opted. Let me tell y'all what's going to happen. And y'all, I swear, put this on God. If we're still doing this podcast in 2 years, Elizabeth Warren will be talking about defunding the police. But her version of it will be like, I've cut 3% over the next 15 years with a Pell Grant for police officers who have invested $20,000 in minority communities. Like, that word will just be fucking used all the time. And the policy behind it it'll be like fucking taking a knee or wearing kente cloth. And we know this shit because the shit happens all the time. All the time.
Medicare for all.
Yo! Okay, I don't need to add no more. We had Medicare for all, and then we saw like a wimpy version of it. Then we had Medicare for all who wants it. And they'll be like defund the police for all who want it in a couple of years.
Don't die by police shooting for all who want it.
That is on everything. Like, there's nothing to add. We already used this issue.
Like defund, like language matters, right? And we have to be able to.
Go ahead.
Yeah. No, I was just saying that language matters. Like this, like defund the police is weak language. Like, it wasn't too strong for the 72-year-old man that they shoved over and put the man in the hospital. Like, it wasn't too strong for him. So I mean, it ought to be right across the board, not defund the police. Look, reform police or get rid of the police. Because it's in every country that I've been to, The people you fear are not the criminals; it's the police.
Well, I don't think I've ever feared an English police officer.
Yeah,
guy.
that's because you've never been cracked across the skull in a protest in England, man.
That's true. I haven't been to a protest in England at all. So, hey, I'm also not that scared of French police. I've never seen a clip of a French police officer winning any confrontation.
they always get their asses kicked.
It looks like they just get their ass. They volunteer to get their ass.
Yeah, you know what? While we're on this
pause it.
subject, I'm not afraid of the Greek police. Every time I see a video of the Greek police, they're getting their asses beat.
I posit that it's not that the police in Greece and France and England are any wimpier than the police here in the United States. I posit that it's because the public is empowered to hold them to account. Like, there are actual mechanisms that are built into the system that, hey, if you fuck with the public, this is what's going to happen to you.
They're also demilitarized, and we can talk a little bit about that, I suppose. My point, I guess, like, really, whether you are, I don't really super care if you're like, oh, defund, abolish, demilitarize. Like, my main point here is you come up with these policies, you come up with these words based on wherever you are on the spectrum, based on the policy need and like the outcome that you want. And unfortunately, we have like a large wing of the Democratic Party that makes their verbiage based exclusively on what they think will be above 52% popularity this week. There's no long-term vision. There's no long-term clarity. There's no actual concern for the actual results that are passed on to the public, because that's not their goal. Their goal is not to pass on tangible shit to the public. When was the last time some large tangible shit got passed to the public? They gave you $1,200 one time. And by the way, that's literally is at a scale too low to even talk about what I'm talking about. I'm talking about like on the scale of Medicare. Right. I'm just fucking around here. But my point is, there's literally no vision in any of this. And that's why you can't trust them to make leads on policy demands, because they're not going to be anything but a mirror reflecting what the psyche of the American public is, which is how you get kente cloths and bailouts. Instead, you need to start listening to authors, start listening to activists, start listening to community leaders, start listening to the victims, because they are the people who have lived in the problem or studied the problem. And instead of trying to get like their next job, their next come up, instead are trying to offer solutions to the community. That's a whole different scene. That's a whole different situation.
And when we talk about demilitarizing the police and things like that, let's talk about why that isn't enough. Okay. I want to make a little analogy here. Let's say that some like racist white motherfucker in your town decided that he was going to start beating the asses of gay and black people that he met on the street, and that there was
if he meets a gay black person, he's doing this.
He's just
which is really not good.
Two batons. Yeah. Let's say that that's the case, right? Okay. And then let's say that like that person who's going around beating people's asses, like he becomes friends with the mayor. All right. And then after he becomes friends with the mayor, later on down the road, the mayor like gives him a bunch of new authority. And then later on down the road, the mayor gives him an assault rifle. All right. The Democrats would be saying, let's take away this guy's assault rifle. No, he never should have been out there in the first place. Like, we don't need this guy out there harassing people. And that's the problem with the police and even like demilitarizing the police. There are benefits to demilitarizing the police. Sure, if you compare a highly militarized police and a demilitarized police, you can be like, hey, look, this one's not as bad. It's still bad. It's still really bad. Not like a little bad, but like extremely bad. It's less bad, but still so bad that it's unfathomable to even think about justifying it in any way. It's not enough to say, let's take the assault rifle away from the serial killer. He's still going to kill people. He's just going to get a knife out of his kitchen and go kill some people. You have to do more than that. And when the system is as corrupt as the police, when the system is slave catchers, empowered to do the bidding of the rich, all of these horrible things that we know about the history of the police. You cannot just say we're going to demilitarize them. They are fucked.
Yeah, but let's talk about that term. Let's talk about that term, demilitarizing the police, again in a broader sense, right? We have to remember that this state of affairs is a public policy decision handed down from the Department of Homeland Security after 9/11, right? When we're talking about demilitarizing the police, it is a Chuck Schumer / Nancy Pelosi non-kente cloth type deal, because they directly affect the goddamn budget that the military gets every year. Like, we have to remember that earlier this year, Nancy Pelosi and the House Democrats voted in favor of handing Donald Trump a larger military budget. When the military gets a larger budget, they spend that shit on more planes from Boeing, contracts from Halliburton, and all of those tank manufacturers in the flyover states. And guess where and when they produce too much, guess where those surplus materials go? They go to the police.
Right.
And we don't even have any kind of tracking or central processing. This is one of like the weak sauce Democrat things. I think that there's literally no tracking of who buys, what police department buys this military hardware. It's just there and they buy it. And look, when you have military hardware, you got a culture that's like sees the public as the enemy anyway, right? So when there's when that frustration, like that George Floyd, Breonna Taylor frustration spills over, these cops come out and it's like, finally, this stuff we've been staring at as we walk down through here and down towards the dispatch and all other shit through the office, and the armory, we slide by, we look at it and we go, damn, wish we could use that shit. Now it's time. Now we get the big boy toys, and they're excited about that shit. They're pumped. It's actually real terrifying, man. It makes no sense.
Right, and on top of that, they do things like warrior training, which I'm sure like you guys have heard of, which is like this crazy training where police officers are told that they should envision themselves as predators. And like when you start ingraining that kind of mentality into the people who are supposed to be protecting communities, they start viewing everybody as potential prey.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And it's just terrible. It's messed up. When you have that situation, you are providing, by having all that militarization, you are providing incentives for force, obvious incentives for force. Right now, we have regular police that have shit that used to be like reserved for SWAT teams. And then we have SWAT teams with shit that used to be reserved for the National Guard. It's so weird, Kennedy, you and I, and also Akwo, y'all, we're all of an age where it's hard to believe with people when they say things can't get better, because we watched it with our own eyes get worse over our lifetime. And a lot of the reforms that are being suggested now are not radical reforms. It's people trying to roll the clock back to right before shit got even worse. And of course, we've had all these problems have gone back for years. So even rolling the clock back doesn't fix the problems. But you understand what I'm saying. We have seen this escalation. Sure. And this is the first time that there's been any real pushback to have a de-escalation. And it's got to happen because this shit costs money. Your tax dollars are at work on twisted, evil shit.
Yeah, but even these reforms that we're talking about now is still weak shit, because again, the left, I think the left has a propensity, or I won't even say the left anymore. I'll just say people have a propensity to do this watered down, let's appeal to everybody shit, instead of sticking to their guns and saying, look, let's not defund the police. Let's get rid of the police. Because when I call 911 for a drug overdose, I need to know that the person coming is qualified to save my life. Like, again, I'm Jamaican, right? And in Jamaica, like, do you know that most people never make it, like most gunshot victims never make it from the crime scene, because most people don't know how to put pressure on the wound. Like, we don't even have and again, a lot of these situations don't necessarily call for police, and we need to rethink what the role of the police are in the society. Stop giving them all of these responsibilities.
let's quickly talk about that common canard. Well, before we get to it, no namely, y'all are really good, super interesting and educational. Thanks. Hey, no namely, we have not even hit the gas yet. Like we have like a last quarter of the show to go, and we're gonna really get into it in a second. Murasaki Kimono says, "Are we blaming the Zoomers?" No, we're blaming the Boomers. But the Boomers had power since we were kids, and now all of us as millennials, like I'm a grown ass man. Kennedy, you're a grown ass man. Aqua, you a grown ass man. The Zoomers they don't have any knowledge. They don't know that things can be better, although they see that the shit's unjust and they want to fight back against it. But we've seen that transformation. Our generation has seen that transformation and not had the power to do anything about it. But so with that kind of said, let's be positive. When someone makes that argument, if there's no police, what if someone knocks you upside the head and steals your shit? Who's gonna come and help you? So who helps me if someone knocks me over and steals my collection of podcasts or whatever I have?
Well, I think a lot of people kind of get it twisted in their head that without the police, we wouldn't have like a system of justice, so to speak.
Right.
That there's no way for you to get recompense against someone who has wronged you, and that couldn't be further from the truth, of course. In terms of like we know that we can look at societies that either don't have the kind of formal policing that we have right now, or we can look to the past, to societies that didn't have, including our own, that didn't have this kind of formal policing forever. And we could say, what did they do? And first of all, I want to challenge the assertion that anyone's coming to save you when you get knocked upside the head.
Sure, but people have that belief. Like the people who are making that argument have never been knocked upside the head. And so they don't understand that the cops won't show up until the next day. Right. They don't know, because they watch TV, and when the shit is the fan, like the cops are immediately angry and they turn up.
I would say you gotta look into what happens in real life. You could get shot at. You could get shot. Get shot and not have the cops. They'll show up in the hospital the next day after you're out of surgery and ask you what happened. They're not showing up at the time. The only times that the cops are there in the moment is usually when they're out on patrol. And when they're out on patrol, they're usually looking for like broken windows crime, like we talked about. They're not even looking for serious crime. They're looking for teenagers congregating.
Right. Like the police are very reactive. And that's a great point to bring up, Kennedy. Like you're talking about what will happen if we don't have the police. Like the same shit that happens now. Like kids are going to knock over mailboxes. People are going to try to rob banks. People are going to murder family members or strangers. Like those things are going to happen. What our responsibility is as responsible citizens is to figure out ways how to change people's behavior, modify people's behaviors from now, from like, when they're in high school, making sure they have food to eat every single day. When they're in school, make sure they have food every single day. When they go home, make sure that there's high-speed internet so they can do the goddamn work. If they get arrested, make sure that there are reformative programs in there that make sure that these crimes get expunged from their record if they're not too serious, so they can get a job. Right? Like there are things that we can do to make the police extinct, but we have to start having those conversations about why the police exist in the first place and why these people end up in these situations, such as George Floyd.
Well, like I mentioned earlier, to tie right into what you're saying, Aqua, the majority of people murdered in most states in this country have been in and out of the criminal system for a long time before they are killed. And so, when you're worried about what's going to happen to me when X, Y, and Z, like I said, the people that are experiencing this are the people that are being ground up in this system. So what does that really realistically mean in terms of fixing that? It means that, like Aqua was saying, people got to have food and like security and things like that so that they don't end up in this criminal system in the first place. If you have everything that you need at home and there are no gangs because we defund the gangs by changing the way our laws work around things like drugs and things like that, which is something we could talk more about it later. That's a whole nother topic.
True
But if you got your needs met at home, there's no gangs to go join, because they've all been defunded. People are not going to get into the same kind of lifestyles that lead to them getting into these really bad situations a lot of the time, and like things like that.
When you are recruited into a gang, first of all, it's for a lot of gangs, like you don't have a choice on like whether you're in a gang or not. It's based on where you live. So like if you are on 3rd Street, you are in 3rd Street block, and that's literally it. That's like a survival mechanism. So like there's such a misconception about that would be a totally different episode about how gangs.
That might be something else we talk about later in the week, because that's a whole.
It might be later in the month, because that's a whole different can of eggs.
But I bring it up because a lot of people who end up in gangs, it's like you say, you just join the 3rd Street gang because these are literally the people who feed your community. Like this is how shit gets done in your community, is that there are these people on your block handling things because the system has failed you for so long that you have no other choice but to provide your own alternatives. And no matter how you provide these alternatives, the system is going to come try to shut them down. Like, even if you present them in the most like peaceful, whatever terms possible. And so that's a big part of why some of these gangs end up kind of militant. It has nothing to do with them wanting to get into gang wars and fight these turf battles.
Right.
They get militant because the cops are cracking down on them, feeding their little nephew every fucking week.
And also this kind of needs to be said. Illegal business, gang shit is just a business. And the reason why you have violence around that business is because there's no legal enforcement. And when we talk about legal enforcement, that's like the use of force. So like if we're in a business, right? And me and like Kennedy has a convenience store, and I walk in and I whip Kennedy's ass and I take like a fucking Snickers bar and $20, the police will come like get me and jack me up. But the issue is if we're selling cocaine, like Kennedy's selling cocaine and I beat him up and I take his coca, he cannot go to the cops, right? There's no enforcement mechanism. Like my illegal business has been interfered with. You have to, if you are doing illegal shit, you got to be your own law enforcement. You know what I'm saying? So that means Kennedy needs to round up Leia and Ren and come find me and beat my ass because the cops aren't going to be involved with the shit, right?
And I think when you put it in all this kind of context, it all starts to come together how the system is just so self-perpetuating that like basically everything about it is like none of these things actually relate to each other. The cops and crime, they have no relationship. Crime is a product of a system of leaving people behind. And it's like, that's what we're looking at here.
The Kennedy army will come for you.
There's 2 of us now.
That's forget. Right. Oh God. I didn't even think that you would get the other Kennedy from Bad Praxis to also join in the attack on me. But that's how gangs start, by the way. It's just they were on the show, so now they're in the gang and they have no choice.
Survival.
Come on. If you have food, clothing, money, there will still be murder, theft, etc. Pirate Shopper.
What would you feel if you had everything?
Wait, Pirate Shopper. We didn't come out here and say in law enforcement. If somebody if somebody murders you, someone like will come and get you. Like it's totally different, but it's a specialized institution instead of the police who are like in your school, who are the first step of mental health. All this shit that's been defunded and disseminated since Reagan. We're trying to bring those institutions back to serve people directly. All these domestic violence incidents. Why are the cops doing that? Like, why isn't there somebody whose specialty is domestic violence? In the case of a murder, you would need a fucking police detective to investigate the murder and see who did the shit. And in the case of a theft, you would need somebody to go recover the stolen items and make an arrest. We're not talking about, well, there will be no more laws, man. With no cops, we'll all live free. What we're saying is there's an armed institution in America that has too much power and needs to be decentralized and regulated. That it's only because we're in America that sounds radical.
Right.
Yeah,
And
power stopper. Yeah, I feel you.
Yeah.
You are welcome for the clarification. And look, if you have that question, I'm on the streets. I was at a Black Lives Matter protest on Sunday, and I had a sign that said "De-arm, demilitarize, and defund the police." And somebody asked me the same question you asked. So like, you're not wrong for asking. That's literally why we come on and do this show, so we can talk about this shit, so that now you know better, and you can tell somebody in your neighborhood who asked you the same question. And that's kind of what we need in order to spread this information. That's literally, like, not the plug, but that's literally why we do independent media at patreon.com/notsafe. Because it's shit, these conversations, you don't even have time to do them in a mainstream media format, because we've been kicking it for an hour and we've just scratched the surface of the shit. And then CNN, they only have 60 seconds. And even if they wanted to cover the shit, they wouldn't do it in a real way. So you've got the attention span, and hopefully you got like some fucking reward out of it.
And this is exactly what I was saying at the very start of this show when I said, you know, people, like, we're all reaching this point where we know that this institution is wrong, and we hear these people crying that it needs to go, but we haven't been exposed to the what's next enough. And I want to tell y'all, just before we go, just a little tiny bit about like the Zapatista model of law enforcement. The Zapatistas now are like 400K strong. It is a large community being run autonomously and sort of anarchically, which is a word that people don't understand, because you say something's being run anarchically and they're like, how can it be? There's no organization. It's like, that's not what that means. But we'll get into that another time. But the point is that the Zapatistas have their own autonomous model of, you know, community self-empowerment that they are following. And like I said, there's 400K people now. It's a lot of people in this community in Mexico. The government was forced to recognize because they could not stop these people from having their movement. And the communities in Zapatista and EZLN controlled land all have their own little community police services. They're nothing like our police at all. And in the Zapatista communities, all the land is owned by everyone. It's all community owned. Businesses are community owned. People don't have a strong sense of alienation. People are directly tied to all of these things around them, and they're provided for. No one goes hungry in the EZLN territory. No one goes without a house in EZLN territory, all of these things. And they have very little crime, and their methods of dealing with crime are also radically different. It's not that they don't exist, but they're radically different than ours. But I just want to point out that, like, you know, when we talk about this stuff, that like there are models out there right now that you can go research. You can go look up the Zapatistas. You can go visit them. They want you to come. They want people to come learn what they're doing and to come witness this.
This sounds like something that you and Rebecca Parson would do on an adventure together.
I'm gonna pitch that to Rebecca right after the show.
We're also pitching an interview with her dog. We're really hoping to get her dog on the show to come answer questions. Murasaki Kimono says, "Sell out."
We are.
Buddy, we have not even begun to grift. You have not, man. When this Patreon hits a few $100s, you're gonna see some serious shit. Let me tell you. So, y'all chip in a couple dollars and let's make this shit hot. Let's make it happen, because we are the hardest working podcast on the damn left by far. Who's making content like? I know you about to break us up and shit. Who's making content like this? Who's grinding like this? Name somebody.
Can't.
You can't.
We got to wrap this up, folks. It has been a great time, of course, as always. Aqua Walters, thank you so much for joining us. Quickly, give your plugs real fast.
The pluggables, like you see right here.
Smartest guest we've ever had. Plug right there in the Twitter. Real boss shit. Aqua, I hope I wouldn't say we're struggling filling things up, because there's so much things that are happening. But like, it's always good to have guests to come on and spit that shit. So Aqua, definitely feel free to come back, literally, like, whenever you feel like it.
Yeah,
indeed, brother. Just say the word and I'm there.
Absolutely.
We'll definitely be having you back soon. And for everybody watching, we're going to be doing live streams Monday through Friday this week, same way we've been doing. There will be one exception to the schedule, which is that instead of at 4 Eastern, our Wednesday stream will start at 2:30 Eastern. It's going to be early, and you do not want to miss it, because we're going to have Janos Martin here with us. It's going to be sick.
And
So-
hey, if you are not there, we can probably rebroadcast that Janos interview.
The
At
videos
4.
will stay up as they always do.
And the video will still be up. So at
Yeah.
4, just log in and watch the shit. It's okay.
Yeah, just if you're not there at 2:30 or if you're not there at 4, it doesn't matter. Just come back, watch it later. It's all good. Also, on the subject of content coming out right after this wraps up,
Hey,
our podcast interview with Shanyat Chowdhury will be
let's
coming out. If
go.
y'all remember Shanyat, he was one of our like pretty early guests. He came back to update us on his campaign, to talk about shit. It was a great time. It's a really positive, just like good feels, good vibes episode, which I think we could all use a little of right now. So you're going to want to check that out. That'll be coming out like within the hour of this wrapping up. So keep your eyes peeled for that, and we will see you tomorrow.
Bye-bye.